Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
I think Humza, having been in the job for a relatively short period of time, is proving himself to be a very, very fine First Minister.
My God, that's the best yet.
Welcome, folks. Welcome to Through a Scottish Prism. I hope you and yours are well. Couldn't resist putting that up. It kind of sums up how things are. It's been a hell of a week. I know we keep saying that, but it really is. This one's a belter. So I need a good squad to help me. So let's start bringing them in. We'll start with our favourite lawyer from Clackmannanshire, our Eva. Eva, hello. How are you doing?
Hi, Roddy. I think I'm looking forward to a marathon tonight. This could be overtime. We could still be here at midnight with everything that's been happening this week.
I wouldn't say it's that bad, but Lloyd there in Edinburgh, he's arrived with a sleeping bag and a pack of sandwiches. How are you doing, Lloyd?
I'm doing fine.
Good.
I despair for my country.
Yeah, it is a worry. It is a worry. And over there in Belgium, our much-travelled Coatbridge Cavalier, Mr. Boswell, how are you?
Yeah, very good. It's a wee bit dark in here. I'm looking at on a beautiful garden. Unfortunately, if I turn it round, it just doesn't work. So I get the view. You're stuck with this view, I'm afraid.
Well, we just have to view you. I will live with that. And because it's such a heck of a week, you haven't got one. You've got two special, or as we call them, mystery guests, but there's nothing mysterious about them. We've got one, we're bringing back the old Paisley Mohawk, who at the moment is the Miami Marauder over in Florida. Mr. Lawson, how are you?
The Tampa Buccaneer, if you don't mind.
Ooh.
Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
I can live with the old Tampa Buccaneer. We can do that. So, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm enjoying my time over here. I was going to say I'm avoiding all the crises, but there's quite a crisis going on over here with problems with the political leadership as well. You know, it's another situation. I don't know who I would vote for in Scotland at the moment, and I certainly don't know who I would vote for if I had a vote here in America, because it's absolute pandemonium.
Yeah, it's the world's in one hell of a place. But as I said, there's not one. We have two special guests for you, and none other than the man behind All Under One banner who lets you out marching. It's Neil Mackay. Welcome, Neil. Oh,
hi, Roddy.
Are you okay?
Can you hear it?
Oh, good.
Okay
I couldn't hear you. Yeah, nice to see you. Well, we're going to this week, but there you go. We're reminding everyone there's a march here on the 4th of May. Good. And Techie, could you stick up the all under one banner meme so folks, take a screenshot when this goes up so you don't forget. There you go. The march on the 4th. Are you all geared up for it, Neil? Looking forward to it, the first one of the season?
Aye, everything's geared up. It's going to be a big one. I think several tens of thousands we're looking at. But even with everything that's going on, actually, it's all good, I think, for the attendance. So onwards we go. Good.
And is the first activist, is he going to turn up, or does he only turn up at Business for Scotland and the National Paper dues?
It just seems, Roddy, that he'll only turn up for things that he's comfortable turning up at, and that is Believe in Scotland, Business for Scotland. We've had the response for the SNP today that Alison Thulis, MP, is going to speak for them, but no word from Humza and no word about what other ones he might turn up at later in the year, so who knows.
There you go, folks. Remember that when it's the biggest march of the year, they don't turn up. Not so good. Anyway, now, there's been so much happening. Where could I start, Eva? Let me think. What's the biggest thing this week? I think, get ready, Techie, stick up the headline. It's at last, the Butte House agreement has been broken by the SNP. We thought it was going to go the other way, but they've broken it. Did it come as a surprise to you that the SNP got in the first blow? Yeah, the Scottish Greats. There you go.
No, I wasn't surprised that Humza did what he did when he did it. I was disappointed that it took him so long, and it's been interesting to see how certain people in the SNP or supporters of the SNP are now trying to blame all the problems of the last couple of years on the Greens, as if the Greens did it and somehow ran away. So I went off to check to see how many Green MSPs there were, because I couldn't believe that such a small group of people could create so much havoc, division, and cost so much money to the country in such a short period of time. There's actually only 7 Green MSPs, and they've had an inordinate amount of influence on this country in the past few years, quite out of all proportion to either the votes that they got, their popularity, and most certainly their ability. They should never have been in government in the first place. And what confirms that to be the case is the fact that a couple of days after they've been booted out, the 2 ministers, Lorna and Bradley, their jobs remain unfilled. So they were obviously, whatever they were doing, surplus to requirements. And they are, no laughing, but crying all the way to the bank, because the 2 of them have just lost about £54,000 per annum by way of income. In my book, we should be paying a lot of that back, because it was money they didn't earn in the first place, given some instances the millions, if not billions, that have cost this country in wasted revenue or lost revenue. So it was long overdue that they left the government. What's interesting, though, is the justification for them being in government in the first place has gone. It was supposed to be where a majority government will be strong, and it was also we are an independent supporting government because we are a coalition of 2 strong independent supporting parties. And what's managed to be achieved from that is the fact that independence means the choice more than half the population, but the popularity of the SNP has consistently reduced, so that now it's probably somewhere around 31% or so, thanks in no small part to their adoption and encouragement and implementation of some of the daftest policies that anybody on the planet's ever come up with. Here, we want to attribute them to the Greens. The SNP are more culpable than the Greens for the condition that our country's in, for bringing them into government in the first place, and nobody should forget that.
Lloyd, it kind of happened. We heard the night before that Stephen Flynn was up and seen in a huddle with Angus Robertson at Holyrood, and then the next day there was the emergency meeting. Did the men in grey kilts pull Humza aside, or was it a case of they were quite sure that the Greens were going to vote to leave anyway, so they thought, it was a question of, no, I chucked you first type attitude? What do you think?
Well, the SNP doesn't have any men in grey kilts anymore. It's just got operators on the behalf of other organisations. I think if Stephen Flynn and Angus Robertson are speaking, then I think that's a meeting of minds and plotters, without a doubt. Angus Robertson is he's second only to Michael Russell in his ability to plot and connive and effectively ruin the democracy of the Scottish National Party. I think Humza Yousaf is getting advice from 2 different areas. I think he's trying to combine the 2, and as a result of that, he falls through the middle and looks very weak, looks frankly like a man who knows it's over, but he's going to fight to the last, as he always does. And this is the really difficult thing. We have politicians who have learned under the 9 years of the Sturgeon despotism. They believe that you can fight your way out of any wet paper bag, that you can, simply by digging your heels in, it will pass, it will be tomorrow's news, it will be wrapping fish and chips. Those days are over. Humza's making a terrible, terrible mistake here, but I think it's not really of his creation. She created the Abuse House Agreement, he went along with it, and now he has served his purpose and it's time for him to go. And I think it's interesting the names that are being thrust forward as his possible replacement, because all of them have an interest in the policies, particularly the foreign policies of not the Scottish government. And I think what we're seeing here is a wrestling match between the outside forces that operate within our politics to secure the leadership for the future. Hence the fact that Kate Forbes is not really being talked up in this contest, because she's the one that they're bringing in at a later date once they've got somebody else out of the way.
Yeah, because that's one of, from your old stomping ground, Phil, one of the names that's getting put about to replace is Neil Gray. Now, he's fairly new, I mean, he only went in the last intake because he'd been down at Westminster, and he was allowed, unlike Joanna or Philippa, to come up and stand without having to sack all his staff. Do you think that he was perhaps one of these grey kilted men that's in a word with Humza?
There's people in grey kilts behind Neil Gray, and Neil has come to the fore. He's not without talent or ability, and he's certainly improved in his time in office. But the reason that Neil Gray has been put forward and was allowed to do what both Joanna and Philippa were not allowed to do is because he's doing what he's told, and will continue to do what he's told, exactly what he's told to do. His whole career's been based upon doing what certain men in grey kilts tell him to do. So that's why he's a safe pair of hands until they see an illusionary transfer over to Kate, who will be the new broom. They will call it the big clean-out's been done after whoever takes the fall the next fall from Humza's position. Humza's out. He's toast. I mean, what interests me here is what the rest of the world's talking about. Even the New York Times is reporting this. You know, what do we know about the breakup of the coalition government and the power sharing agreement and the Greens? And I mean, he abrupted it very, very abruptly. He ended it. And if you remember, if you read the Wings article, he saw it coming. He announced that it was going to happen, and sure enough, the emergency meeting was exactly that, to decide what they were going to do, how they were going to do it. And really, I think what they were doing were deconstructing this agreement before the Greens did it and humiliated them. I think that's where we're going on this one. And it took the Greens possibly by surprise that they would do this. But a big one, I know we'll probably come on to it later, but the climate change issue and the softening, deliberate, of the SNP, of the climate change targets, which there should be no surprise here, they were never, ever attainable. Not even do you want to do it. It really is such a stupid thing to do, and I've been going on about this a long time. But this came in under Sturgeon, and the Greens are now blamed for it. And we'll maybe go on in more detail later on. But
we talked about this last week when you couldn't make it. It was at COP's 28 or 18 rather, where Nicola did one of her "I can exclusively be revealed today." You know, Scotland will be net zero by next Thursday type things. That was what happened.
Pish, load of pish, Nicola.
Yes, that technical term, absolutely. That's a technical term for it. Ian, you've been around a long time. Would you have believed that they could get themselves into such... I mean, we keep seeing them get into messes. Do you believe they could get into such a big mess as they've managed this time?
Well, there's a few things strike me about this. The first thing that strikes me is the completely amateur way they handled ending the agreement. I mean, the Greens thought they were going to play a game here. They thought they had 30 days to continually feed stories to the media that they were going to, break off this agreement. But I mean, long before that happened, you had them openly saying, A, independence was no longer a red line, and B, that they would work with the Labour Party to form a new administration. Now, that was a clear opportunity to ditch them in a very constructive way that would have absolutely destroyed them. Both opportunities completely and utterly missed. Instead, we had the ridiculous scene of Mary Todd on TV the night before, a couple of hours before, extolling the virtues of the SNP-Green deal. Obviously, she was out the loop. Nobody told her her career should be over, because that was the most public example of not getting told what's going on behind your back. So, I mean, at the end of the day, but this is a great opportunity. And I can't understand why people in the SNP are even remotely getting upset. This is an opportunity to completely reset a few months before the election. And instead of being in the back foot with all these stupid minority issues, get on the front foot, start talking about what would be lost if it was a Labour government. You know, free education, you know, prescriptions, all the rest, the whole line of things that were introduced, of course, by Alex Salmond's government. But nevertheless, these are the things that would be at threat. You know, and the SNP's got an opportunity to move on to the front foot. They have to ditch Humza. Humza's insisting today is going to stay. That would be an absolute unmitigated disaster. He's been hauled way below the waterline for months. This is the final straw. They've got to ditch him. I don't know who they can replace him with. That's the other problem. Because I know most of the MSPs, and frankly, there's nobody there that's any good. You know, so that's a bit of a problem.
just a tad. But you know, here's the thing: 2 or 3 days before he took this very drastic action, Humza was talking up the coalition. He was saying how great it was to have the Greens. So what happened in the last 2 or 3 days that made him suddenly flip?
I think he thought they were going to do a deal with Labour.
Is that what you think, Neil? I don't know if Neil's hearing you or not.
Aye, and I think he's just, I wasn't sure where we were going there, but yeah, definitely, it seems quite a rash move. I don't know, he's in very shaky ground, and as much as he seems to know that he's on shaky ground, he's just sort of bulldozing ahead with this cocksure style that he's got. And it's all going to end in tears, really, for him anyway. He's just not the leader for Scotland. And it would be great if he was, because we would have what we need, but we don't. So he needs to go. But I don't see how there's anyone in the SNP that is capable of providing the leadership that not just the party needs, but the country needs. So we're in a quandary as to where we go. But I think probably the wisest move would be to have an election, a Holyrood election, but take it on. You know, leadership, take it on, but that would be like a personality transplant would be required, not just for Humza, but for the party, and that's not going to happen. So I don't quite know what's going to happen, but certainly, like for one point to make here, Humza should use the opportunity next Saturday at the march. That's a golden opportunity to go right.
Yes.
I'm going to go to that. I'm going to announce going to that. Galvanise support around them, around the party, show some true leadership for what should be a nationalist party. But that's not going to happen. So who knows? But it's not. It's all very murky, isn't it?
Yeah. We've said on here so many times, Eva, everyone on here, so many weeks. You know, they need to ditch the Greens, get rid of the Brute House Agreement. You know, get rid of the GRR, get rid of the hate crime bill, get rid of all this virtue signalling. And as Ian has said, you know, get back on the front foot, talk about independence, some good governance, and, you know, get going. And again, Neil's right as well, as you know, this was an ideal opportunity next Saturday to say, look, we're back. I'm telling all my MPs have got to turn up, all my MSPs and all their staff. I want you all under one banner. It's time to put the band back together again. It's a cracking opportunity. They aren't going to take it, the looks of things.
But you see, that unity, the desire for that common purpose is evident within the grassroots and within the activist base of every party, every organisation, every independent supporter. We know this from All Under One Banner particularly, but earlier this week I chaired an event in Brechin organised by Yes Brechin, and it was an All Under One Banner type of event where the speakers included Kenny Braes, who's an SNP councillor on Angus Council, Neil Hanvey, obviously, Alba MP, Sally Hughes, independent candidate for independence in Perth and Kinross-shire against Pete Wishart, Alan Petrie from Not My Parliament campaign, and Peter Bell, the blogger. And everybody in the room was enthused and very keen to hear all different points of view as to how best to make sure that our movement actually is unified and that we proceed with a plan towards regaining our country's independence. And the spirit in the room was such that there were conversations breaking out all over the place before the event started and during the break and at the end about how do we persuade elected politicians and party leaders to get together and do what the country needs to be done. You know, there's an awful lot of different organisations talking about setting up different kinds of conventions. Obviously, we've got Salvo, Liberation.Scot, and related organisations and plans, and there's been a launch of a plan for a convention and lots of ideas about what we can do. And the overriding problem with all of this stuff is that the party leaders are not talking to each other. Instead, they're arguing with each other and they're trying to score points off each other, because that's what the last couple of days has been, where you've had the SNP saying what they said, and then you've a grand announcement from the Alba Party about what they are or are not going to do. You've got a claim that somehow Ash Regan is a kingmaker. She's not a kingmaker. If the SNP give in to or make concessions to Ash Regan, the SNP will lose some of their own members. So it'll be a kind of tit-for-tat exercise that will not be constructive for the SNP. The Greens, who obviously went in the huff when they were sacked, have subsequently said to the SNP again. So are the SNP to invite them back in again? I don't know. So the whole thing is a mess, and it's messy because party politics is messy, and that's what the general public is fed up with. So the right way to go about this would be if Humza actually did phone round party leaders beyond those that are in Scottish Parliament, but to go particularly to those who are out part of the independence movement. And that would mean that he would have to eat humble pie, but he'd have to learn from what Better Together have done in the past and are capable of doing again. It can be no coincidence that on the day that Humza announces the termination of the House Agreement, we've got Douglas Ross, the Tory leader, lodging a motion of no confidence. Bloody sorry. Honestly. So you've got the Tory motion of no confidence in Humza, which was the wrong way to go about things. They should have lodged a motion of no confidence in the Scottish Government. But they do that flushes out to see what the support is. And then that's following the day by Labour announcing a vote of no confidence in the whole government. It looks like Tory and Labour are in cahoots with each other. But the independence movement should be united against the unionists, as opposed to having to, look for pleas and have diversionary tactics like there was today. Humza cancelled an independence speech that he was doing somewhere and instead gave a big speech in Dundee where he announced £80 million for affordable housing, conveniently forgetting that a couple of weeks ago he cut the affordable housing budget by £196 million. So he's putting back into the budget less than he's just taken out. But this is a grand announcement designed to divert attention away from the absolute mess that his party's in and the Scottish body politic is in. Really, they all have to do far better than they are doing because they're an embarrassment at the moment.
Lloyd, of course, as Eva alluded to, Douglas Ross thought he was very clever doing a vote of no confidence in the First Minister, which actually would have played into people ourselves, our hands. We've been wanting them to crash the Holyrood administration anyway, and if they couldn't have elected a new leader, that's what we could have had, an independence plebiscite. And now Labour thinking we don't want to be left behind, they've come in now with the whole Scottish Government. But the Labour Party could actually be Turkey's voting for Christmas, because what we know throughout there, that the support for independence is still over 50%, and it has been. It's the SNP that's unpopular, and if they play their cards right, even at this late stage, they could turn this round, couldn't they?
I think, yes, there's a scenario where that could happen, Rory, but I think what everyone's beginning to forget here is there's major financial issues here, not with what's happening with Humza, the whole concept of an election. Let's be honest about it. The Tories do not want an election in Scotland before the general election, right? They are in panic at the moment about what's going to happen in the English local elections that come in this coming Thursday. The Labour Party does not want anything to happen in Scotland before the general election because they're riding quite high, they believe, at the moment. The Liberal Democrats don't have any money. The Greens don't have any money. The SNP don't have any money. Nobody's got any money to fight an extra election. So nobody wants it except us and the people in the independence movement. And we want a Scottish Parliament election by collapsing the Scottish Parliament. But do we want that when the majority of the mainstream media, both papers and television and radio, will focus directly on the current leadership of the SNP? Do we believe that the current leadership of the SNP are capable of winning a Scottish election on an independence plebiscite? Do we believe that, were that to happen, they have either the abilities or the breadth of knowledge to actually negotiate the independence settlement? And the answer to those questions is no, straightforwardly. But what we have to look at this beyond our own shores. Britain is in play here. You know, we're going to have a general election for the British Parliament later this year. The Labour Party think they're going to stroll it, but they don't have enough money in the bank. The Tories don't have enough money in the bank for any extra elections of any kind or any diversions. And they will, which is why I believe Douglas Ross very specifically put down a vote of no confidence, not in the government, but in Humza Yousaf, because that gave the SNP a problem, not the Parliament. Sarwar, someone has pointed out to him that he could actually effectively bring down the government here and cause greater splits within the SNP and between them and the Greens. So he's put down the motion, which was the motion Ross should have put down, which is a motion of no confidence in the government. But I think Sarwar's been slightly smart about this, in as much as, and it's clear from what I've listened to on Radio Scotland this afternoon from sitting Green MSPs, that they will not vote in favour of a vote of no confidence in the government because they'd be voting against themselves. And this whole mantra of we have achieved so much while being in government will effectively become redundant. I think the situation at the moment is this psychodrama will play out for a little while, but it has to be seen against the background of nobody wants an election, right? That's the basis of it. And it's there not because of Scotland, but because of the power balance in Britain.
Ian, this would be the ideal time for a constitutional convention, calling in the political parties, calling in Salvo Liberation, all under one banner, Indy First, Now Scotland, everyone pull the yes groups. This would be the ideal time and pull that unity together while the Greens are off the face of the earth. Don't you agree? You're on mute, Ian, that's a quidiomy. Oh, Techie, can you take Ian off mute?
There you are, I'm okay. I think I'm back.
Right.
I'm
You're
back
back.
now.
Your camera needs to go on, Ian.
All right.
There you go.
There we are.
Yeah, there we are.
Right. I mean, I think the big opportunity is for Alba and the SNP to get together. If they sat down and agreed that in 2026 the campaign will be for independence and it will be, you know, each party will vote for themselves first and for the other second, then you could be pretty confident with independence at over 50%. You would end up with a majority control again in the Scottish Parliament. And that's not beyond them. It's not likely, I'm not suggesting, but that's to do with personalities. And my view is if it's personalities that are the blockage, then you get rid of the personalities, irrespective of who the personality is. And that's the way forward. Because the minute you had a SNP Alba thing in place for 2026, a lot of people would return to the independence political party cause because they believed there was something happening that has the potential to be successful. If they can't do that, then the SNP are going to get wiped in the general election this year and probably wiped in 2026. But I mean, it's up to them. We can do nothing in this situation other than suggest to them they maybe want to have a severe look at themselves and what these negative vibes are doing, not just to their parties, but to the entire independence movement. It's destructive.
But would you, as Salvo, would you take part in the Constitutional Convention if invited?
Of course we would, so would Liberation, without any question. And I mean, I would just point out to everybody out there, you know, we are probably the third largest political organisation in Scotland, even although we don't stand in elections. You know, we've got a big membership and it's growing, but all the political parties are going in the other direction. So we would very much want to be part of it and playing a major role in it, because we've got some new ideas. I mean, I will announce exclusively on your programme, Roddy, that we have just appointed an international constitutional KC from the Netherlands who will be leading our case to Europe and is at the moment preparing opinion on a whole range of different, very relevant matters to the future of Scottish independence. So there you are, your programme's got an exclusive, world exclusive.
Are you going to charge me? I take it I've got to send a cheque to post as usual.
No, I'm basically telling you you're not getting your pound for me being mute.
There's always a catch for you, Lawson. There's always a catch.
There is.
Neil, I know you're apolitical and all under one banner, but would you, if you were invited into a constitutional convention, would you participate?
Oh, definitely. All under one banner. We'd be more than happy to participate in that. I mean, certainly all under one banner is non-party political in the sense that everybody, as long as you support independence, we want you there. It's about mass mobilisations. It's about taking to the streets for Scottish independence, full stop. That's what it's about. But that's all under one banner. Obviously, I'm myself. I've got my own views, my own politics and all the rest of it. But certainly a constitutional convention is the way forward. And yeah, really it should have been, well, when I say should it would have been great if this had happened. The SNP announced this a few years ago. It would have been great if they'd have made progress on this as well as other things. But they've been doing all sorts of nonsense, really, and wasting our time for a number of years. So it'd be great. It doesn't really matter where it comes from, but the Independence Forum, I think, is the one that's going to be at St Andrew's Day later on in the year, and that has promise. We've been attending that already. There's been some preliminary meetings, and it does have all the kind of, you know, the hallmarks of what it should be. Believe in Scotland were invited to it, but they wouldn't attend. A similar position to the Greens, where if they're there, we won't be there. But really, we need everybody there if we're going to do it.
Absolutely. I should have mentioned, and I did just by omission, but SSRG, the Independence Forum, absolutely. Those two should also be there. And anyone I've forgotten, I apologise. For any of my guests can think of anyone I've forgotten, do remind me. Phil, do you see any chances of a constitutional convention, and do you think it would be the way forward, or can you think of any other way they can get moving, take advantage of this latest development?
Taking advantage of this latest development, it depends very much on the condition of the combatants or combatant. And here, when you think what we're going to do when we do turn round and all face the right direction, we're going to take on the British establishment. So Lloyd is 100% on this. I agree 100% with what he said. He nailed it. We need a clear out of the SNP and reconstruct the independence movement. We do not want to go against the establishment in this condition. We have substantial rebuilding to do before we are again ready to take on the British establishment. Lloyd's right, we're in no fit state to fight, when the next shot we get will be the first in over 10 years. And if we lose it, how long again do we have to wait? Ian and Neil, also on the money, yes, SNP and Alba and the United Scotland organisation, SSRG, Salvo, all under one banner, etc. Whether it's a yes to or otherwise, a constitutional convention that is supported by a fully unified fully unified parties is the way, and organisations is the way to go. But remember this. With agents of the Crown, or at least puppets of the Crown, in the leadership of the SNP and God knows where else, why would we risk taking a shot at the title with a faulty gun?
There's that. I'm going to be a wee bit controversial here. I could probably get into trouble with some of our viewers, and maybe even with some of the people in this group today. I put out an old blog of mine today from 2017, when I was still a member of the SNP, and I was talking about they were too quick to mitigate, and we were being too kind to our people. Maybe we should start. I said at that time, any constituencies that were were unionist, we should, let their council tax go up, charge them for uni fees, etc. To let them get a wee taste of that's what you're supporting. That's what being unionist is all about. Maybe it wouldn't be a bad thing to lose this vote of no confidence and give the Scottish public 5 years of a Lib Lab pack or a Tory Lab pack to let them see. Because if you've noticed with the Labour Party going round just now, who all cock a hoop, an awful lot of youngsters there, too young to remember what being under Labour and Liberals like. Would I be, I mean, as I say, getting some trouble here, but I don't think it would be a bad thing to have one term of the unionists just to remind everyone how bad it is.
I can see the point in that, but it's not my preferred option. And where I'm really disappointed actually with party politics is this constant issue that we can do it in 2026. Some people don't have that long to wait. Some people alive now won't be alive then. And some people who die between now and then will die unnecessary deaths because of circumstances that they live in Scotland unnecessarily because of poverty, want, and as we know, addiction issues and the like. So I'm not prepared to consider that. I think that what needs to happen today, and we've said this so many times on this show in the last couple of years especially, is that politicians who are out of touch with the people need to become in touch with the people again. And watching what's been played out around Holyrood in the last couple of days serves as a reminder that most politicians are completely out of touch with what's going on the ground. An example was, as I said earlier, Humza's exclusive reveal today about the £80 million for housing, where he forgets to tell folk that he's only providing some of the money that he'd previously taken away. Yeah. Another announcement today was about how the Law Society of Scotland has had to cease talks with the Scottish Government in relation to trying to set up a biannual review of how the legal aid system operates, because for the last couple of years when they've been trying to have these talks, the Scottish Government has basically brought nothing concrete to the table. In the midst of a legal aid crisis, when it's known that criminal legal aid is in jeopardy because it's so badly paid and badly resourced that criminal lawyers are leaving in their droves, either retiring or they're going to join the fiscal service, and there's a shortage of defence lawyers. There's a shortage of civil legal aid lawyers like me who do work for folk who are applying to the courts to see their children, or maybe for a separation or an interdict or a non-harassment order. And legal aid lawyers like me in the civil sphere are also on the way out, primarily because the whole system is very badly under-resourced. So while you're watching a pantomime about Humza and who may or may not be his successor, whether there will or won't be a Scottish election earlier than usual, people in Scotland on the ground are suffering unnecessarily, and the blame for that should be laid fairly and squarely at the door of the SNP, who, despite all these mandates, is it 8 altogether they've had, I've lost count, have done nothing to promote the question of independence since 2015. It's not acceptable. So I don't think that we should be saying they deserve to get a bloody nose and we can try again in a few years' time further down the line. What needs to happen is that those who have made mistakes within the independence movement should acknowledge their mistakes and do better, because that's what the people deserve. You know, we're the electorate, we vote them in, we can vote them out. It just takes too long between elections to make our voices heard. And at the moment also, the SNP are dining out on voter apathy because they're not expecting folk to chap the doors at MPs or MSPs, attend their constituency offices and complain about their inaction, because most of them aren't in their offices anyway. Because if you want an appointment, you have to organise it on the phone or online, because they won't face you, they won't look you eyeball to eyeball and actually be personally accountable for their mistakes. But they're bloody quick to come out and get a selfie when they're opening a food bank or announcing some extra money for a hospital or a school, all of which is pitiful actually. Very, very small beans when you look at the powerhouse that Scotland would be if we were independent.
Yeah, well, Eva's right, but politicians, and our Scottish politicians are no different, do not like doing mea culpa or I got it wrong. honest cover, I meant well, but it just went wrong. It's unlikely, is it?
It's absolutely unlikely, but you know, let's ourselves not get caught up in the political bubble. The SNP might get a bloody nose, but in actual fact, it's the people of our country that will get a bloody nose, and we can't forget that. You know, deciding that the SNP needs punished for its inability to deliver on its mandates and so on. If that ultimately means that for 5 years we've got Keir Starmer effectively in charge of Scotland, then I'm sorry, I cannot go down that road, because even the incompetence of the current mob in Holyrood is nothing compared to what it would be like with a Starmer Labour government effectively controlling the Scottish Parliament. If you look at something really, really simple. Now, for me, independence has been urgent since 1707. It's been urgent since the day now when I joined the party at the age of 15. It's urgent every day. At the moment, and I'm not saying it's any worse now than it was then, because the fact of the matter is it was urgent when I joined, just after we delivered or found the oil in the North Sea that's effectively built London. It was urgent then, it's still urgent. One of the things that makes it even more urgent, and why it's essential that we prevent Keir Starmer's Labour Party taking control of the Scottish Parliament in any form whatsoever, be a unionist coalition or whatever, is the issue of free ports. The free ports are supported entirely by the Labour Party. There will be no questioning about them. They will go ahead, and the sovereignty of our country will be compromised to a point where it will make it extremely difficult for us to achieve our central aim, which is the independence of our country. Now, I'm not prepared for the people of this country to get 5 years worth of crap from a Labour Party. What we need now, and what the membership of the Scottish National Party has to do, it needs to rise up, get a spine, and tell your members it's time to go. Any and every single member of the Scottish Parliament who cannot tell the difference between a man and a woman, and anyone who believes that there's no requirement for misogyny to be contained in a hate crime bill, frankly, is not fit to run a pedestrian crossing. Never mind a country. We can't afford a bloody nose with a Labour government. We can't. But we need soul searching amongst the membership of the Scottish National Party, because as you said, Roddy, you'll never get mea culpa from people who have been massively over-promoted, who know they've been over-promoted, and only understand how to do politics in a Sturgeonite fashion. No country can proceed on that basis.
No, Ian, I know you and your organisation have worked extremely hard on free ports, trying to alert the Scottish people of the danger that lies ahead. Can you see any benefit in the SNP getting a blooded nose, or is it sometimes you think just better sticking with the devil we know?
Well, I mean, I think we need a resistance movement in Scotland. It should be being led by the SNP, as until now at least, the predominant party, supposedly in favour of Scottish independence. But I mean, free ports is another big weakness for them, because, you know, Scotland is not in a territorial union. If you examine the articles and the acts and the Treaty of Union, there is no mention of Scotland's territory being taken out of the control of Scots. To give you an example, if you remember back to the eve of devolution in 1999, if we were in a territorial union, there'd have been no requirement for Tony Blair to convince Donald Dewar to sign away 6,000 square miles of Scottish waters and transfer them to England. So there's no doubt about this. They have no right over our territory. And I'm going to be publishing, by the way, just a wee plug for my blog, a map at the start of next week, which will show you how much of Scotland is taken up by these free ports, the city deals, and special economic zones. And I mean, there's not a lot left after all this. This is us handing our country and in its economy over free gratis to these corporations. And all the money and all the profits will be immediately sucked out of Scotland and away to whatever tax haven they decide to plonk their money. And I mean, how this can be happening when we've got elected politicians to defend our interests is completely beyond me. I mean, they're just simply not doing their job. And as Lloyd says, you know, we should be flagging up Freeports for the absolute rip-off that they are. We're giving them 25-year deals. That means, I mean, I hope Scotland's independent long before 25 years, but we're going to end up in the courts because of these deals that are being agreed and signed today. We're handing England and even worse, corporations control over our land. It's absolutely disgraceful.
Lloyd, you wanted to say something? Quid, mate, quid.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'll send the pounds in the post. But no, let me just clear something up for everyone. Tony Blair and Donald Dewar may well have spoken about changing the North Sea boundary between Scotland and England. I was a member of the Scottish Parliament. This was one of the first votes that was taken in the Parliament, and I was the only member of the Scottish National Party, or indeed of the Parliament, that did not vote, because that order in council that changed our border had to be voted for in the Scottish Parliament for it to come into legal force, right? So it wasn't a dirty deal with Donald Dewar and Tony Blair. The Scottish Parliament, one of its first acts as a devolution parliament, was to give away 650,000 square miles of our territory. When that was brought up at the Scottish National Party group meeting, and it was suggested by some members of the SNP group that maybe it wasn't the best look for the Party of Independence to give away, or indeed to support the order in council that gave away our land. That was poo-pooed at the time because we were all meant to be good boys and girls, that we weren't to clash over things like that. And I hope people remember this. It was not Donald Dewar and Tony Blair. The Scottish Parliament agreed to that change of border.
Okay, cheers. Thanks for that. Neil, do you think giving a bloody nose to the SNP is the way forward, or would you like to see us trying to repair the damage, which we've been trying to do for 10 years?
Well, I don't think there's anything anybody really can do. I think everything's totally, you know, these wheels are in motion. These are big, you know, this is a big phenomena, really. It's out with of any, you can suggest things, like Eva says, it be, you know, the principled stance about correct about wanting to fight for things now and change, and that's all good and proper, but I think it might well need to come to that. It might well need to come to you know, scorched earth, really. A period of time where the SNP are in opposition, and like a sort of arrogant football team that wins a lot, and they need a good thrashing to actually get, you know, to get a bit of humility. And
I agree on that.
It may well, I'm not advocating that, and there's not, whether I advocate it or I don't, it doesn't matter. I think what actually matters is what happens, and what's going to happen. There's a really good chance of that happening, because they've got between now and I suppose 2026 to really get the house in order, to present different leadership, to drop really deeply unpopular policies and refocus on independence and unite the movement. But if they don't do that, then I think as a consequence of that, they are going to get a bloody nose. So it's in their hands, you know, they're the ones that are doing it. We'll need to see what happens, but would I like to see it? I suppose no. My preference would be they sort things out yesterday, but you know, that I don't think that's going to happen. So it may well take catastrophe for things to change. And actually, just like talking about the free ports and everything like that, and I'm against that as well, just to make it clear personally, for the reasons stated. But I mean, you've got a situation where they're kind of facilitating it, basically. They're facilitating all of this stuff, like the ScotWind auction and other things. So we're going to really need to back to the drawing board. Now, are they going to have that foresight now, or is it going to take that to happen? But my final point, I suppose, what I was trying to say there, was it might, if it does happen, that the SNP get severely defeated and we end up with a unionist coalition or a Labour Holyrood government for 5 years, It is terrible. There's no argument with that. But at least then we can kind of galvanise our forces outside the Parliament and across the country, because we'll have an identifiable British enemy in our Parliament. Whereas at the moment, it's all, they're all wearing masks and we don't know who's who. We know there's all sorts of skullduggery going on. We know there's agents involved. Brit bastards, should I say. But the point is, what we need to do is that focus would be excellent. That contrast would be excellent. That would be one silver lining to it, and we would grow and we'd develop, and then we would go forwards and we'd take it on seriously. So hopefully it gets sorted out prior to that, and then we have a 2026 election, which is amazing, and whether it's a plebiscite or it sets up a vote or something. If not, I don't think that option that you've suggested, Roddy, is a worst case scenario. I think it could be okay as well.
Here's the thing, Paul. Would it be a better scenario if these two votes of no confidence are defeated, and the status quo is such in Holyrood, and they get their bloody nose at the UK general election? Because let's be honest, if we win all of the seats, it makes no difference. As you know, as one of the 56 out of 59, it makes no bloody difference if we send down one or whatever it is. Now it's 56, I think now is or 57, I can't remember how many.
I think it's reduced.
So even if we send down all 57, it makes not a bit of bloody difference. So
Correct.
Would it be better to let them get their bloody nose at Westminster and get them wakened up for 26?
I don't think it makes much difference. I mean, the timing here, I agree with a lot that's been said. Freeports are a disaster of massive proportions, which is incidentally why Kate Forbes is a wrong'un. Comment earlier on this land, the grab that's stolen to take some of the oil and gas reserves. The United Nations Constitution and the Law of the Sea goes completely against that. You're not allowed to do it. The delineation on how international waters are divvied up is well ensconced in the UNCLOS regulations. We go to the UN as an independent country. It's ours, full stop. I just don't know how we can avoid a Labour victory. The incompetence levels, and regardless of how it's done, and I agree with everything that's been said before, the political machinations are such that we've got to look at who benefits from the collapse of this government, and there may not be a clear winner here. It could, you could end up with a similar situation where the Greens do, in fact, get to choose who they join up with, or the Lib Dems even get to choose who they join up, or God forbid, the Tories and Labour decide who they get to join up with. But I just don't see how we can avoid a unionist government. And the problem is... Are
you talking Westminster or Holyrood?
No, I'm talking about what's coming up in Westminster. I'm not if it comes, and it doesn't matter what comes. If we're forced into this situation where we've got to do Holyrood first, I agree with the scenario earlier that was put forward by Lloyd. There's no one in a fit state to run it, to fight it, and it's harder to predict the outturn and how it will play with the people, because what it does is show the shambles that is politics in Britain as it stands, and particularly in Scotland. So what we do need... the problem is we can't afford it. Our people don't have the time, the theft of resources, the free ports, the poverty, the eye-watering, crippling poverty that is on the increase. And we do need an SNP clear out. The problem I see is that I believe it will only happen. It will only happen when the SNP are no longer in power. Why? Because SNP do need to lose bad. I spoke recently with a friend, an MP in the Conservative Party, who asked why I'm so critical of the SNP right now. I responded, the bigger the car crash of the current SNP, they will fall apart, and very quickly, if they lose power, the carpetbaggers shall abscond. They'll just disappear, and it'll be easier to build up without the traitors and shysters still currently in the SNP rules. Contrast that with limping on with these guys on the inside. Now, many will stay, some will stay, but a great many of the shysters and tools of these carpetbaggers and the agents and the establishment will walk when there's not a pretty penny in it for them. So that is the big up about Scotland losing power, that we lose a lot of these people who, wittingly or otherwise, are keeping us on our knees.
Yeah, I think we need to take a beating at Westminster. When I say we, I mean the SNP. Take a beating, and that maybe make them focus on what they need to do for 26. But one of the things we've been talking about here is, you know, the kingmaker being Ash Reagan and whatnot. But here's something, Eva. This week, another cracker. The juryless trials, the Scottish Justice Bill, had 62 abstentions, including the Ewings, Christina Graham. Who else have I missed? There was someone else. I'm trying to remember who else was. Who have I missed? I can't remember who I've missed. Ivan McKee and Michelle Thompson. Now, who's to say that in a vote of no confidence that they're not the kingmakers? They don't turn around and say, get rid of the juryless trials, get rid of the GRR. They might be the ones that are pulling the strings more likely than a single Alapa MSP.
I would like to think so, because I know that your viewers will appreciate that the Ewings are lawyers. Winnie Ewing was a lawyer. Christine Graham was a lawyer. Isn't it funny that it's the lawyers that are speaking out against the stupid legislation that the SNP continually try to introduce? And what really worries me when you're talking in terms of a Labour victory at Westminster is the fact that the Gender Recognition Reform Bill is still on the books. It's not dead. It's on life support, but it can be revived. A Labour government would be perfectly capable of reviving it, and you may find that it might be mooted after the Westminster election, that that's exactly what happens. And that is a very difficult, dangerous set of circumstances for all those in Scotland who oppose it. So if you want to talk in terms of where does the SNP or the Scottish Government go from here in relation to credibility within the independence movement and credibility in the eyes of the general population, the first thing that should happen should be that the Gender Recognition Reform Bill is removed entirely from the statute book. It's rubbed out, it goes, it disappears, so that it's not there as a sword of Damocles hanging over everybody's head. If the SNP genuinely understood the depth of feeling in the country that there is to the Gender Recognition Reform Bill, they would remove it, and they would do that today without delay. They would also review the position with the Hate Crime Act and misogyny legislation that's proposed. And they would look again at the legislation as regards victims, etc., whether it's juryless trials, corroboration, not proven, a whole load of stuff that's in that bill, because that's bad legislation. It's poorly drafted. Everybody knows it's poorly drafted. In the main, that legislation tends not to follow the recommendations of the experts who reported prior to the legislation being drafted. So it is time to get the adults back in the room. And in this instance, the adults relative to all these legislative changes are mainly lawyers and people who've lived a life prior to becoming elected to the Scottish Parliament. An awful lot of those people who support the wilder legislative proposals are folk who have only lived within the political bubble. Their work experience has mainly been in politics. They've generally not lived out in the outside world in a business context or in service industries, or just dodging along with normal folk in all the vagaries of normal bog standard life in Scotland. And that's what's wrong. They're out of touch. In relation to the wider picture, how do you set Scotland back on the right road again? How do you get the independence movement on the right road again? It needs people to sit down and look each other in the eye and talk about what their ambitions and their hopes actually are. What it shouldn't be is a series of legislative banana skins, because that's all that we've had for the last couple of years, and it looks like it's all that we're going to get for the next couple of years, ranging across a number of different subjects, where it is impossible to pick something where the SNP or the Greens in the last couple of years actually excelled and passed a piece of legislation that the country said, you know what, that was a bloody good idea. All their adverts, all their party political broadcasts, everything that comes out of the SNP is a list as long as your arm of policies that were passed in Alex Salmond's day, with one exception, the baby box. And, you know, that's just about it. And even that he was partly responsible for. So we've lost 10 years. We don't need to lose any more.
No, absolutely not. But, you know, this juryless trial, what I find quite amazing, Lloyd, when you have a QC of the quality of Joanna Cherry, how does a party come out with what looks like yet another piece of legislation that's going to hit the buffers?
It's because you leave it to civil servants to come up with policies for you. You know, what we're really seeing here is the death throes of devolution. 25 years, we've got to the point where the governing party is scraping around looking for things to do because they can't address the central problem, which is we need to be an independent country and we need to be in control of all our natural resources to address the issues that we've got. They have actually got to the boundary of what's achievable within devolution. That's why they've started scrabbling around in that horrible little world of minority, equality, diversity, inclusion nonsense. They're desperately looking for people to help. And here's a great example of people that they don't help. The Gypsy Traveller community have existed in our country for nearly 1,000 years. They are, without doubt, the minority of minorities who have been treated like a minority by successive governments. But instead of addressing the issues that face the Gypsy Traveller people, the civil servants who are entirely unconnected to the culture of this country, the vast majority of whom are under 30, have been shipped up by the British service, the British Civil Service to New St Andrews House, and have no real understanding of our culture, no understanding of our country, but what they do understand is devolution, and they understand that they are here to administer devolution. Therefore, that leads you into these mysterious highways, byways, and rabbit holes, which are current theoretical structures within the British civil service. Where did Stonewall Law come from? Where does this whole drive on the hate crime bill and GRRB all comes from initiatives that have happened within the British civil service? And if you have compliant, non-thinking, the products of a political system which is flawed in itself, what we have now is legislators who do not have the ability to legislate. What they have the ability to do is to read a piece of paper, be told by a civil servant that this is a good thing, that this will be seen on the world stage as a good thing, so we must proceed with that. And that's what they do, because they've lost sight, partly because they never had it in the first place, that the purpose and function of the Scottish National Party is to achieve national liberation and membership of the United Nations. Now, some of these people think that politics is what's in the front page of a newspaper every morning and it changes each day. What they fail to understand is if you do not have a historical understanding of the circumstances that you find yourself in, then you're not in politics. You're in some kind of bizarre political showbiz that has little or nothing to do with the desires, needs and wishes of the people you were voted to represent.
The clock's clicking on, Ian, and there's still a few things I want to get in. And one of them is, Techie, can you stick up the bit of Humza been upset about the Horizon decision down at Westminster? This is I'm sure everyone's aware of what happened to Horizon, the postmasters, Ian, who were wrongly convicted, and it was dodgy software, etc. And what Humza was upset about is that Westminster didn't legislate for Scotland when they put through a piece of legislation to pardon postmasters. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure Eva will if I'm wrong. This was carried out using Scottish law. They were tried under Scottish law. They were convicted under Scottish law. Surely it's a Scottish legal problem. It's not a legislation problem. And it should be Scottish law that's sorting out the mess.
Of course it should be. And it should be the Scottish law process through the Lord Advocate to come up with a solution. Can I just say, I want to give a mention to Scotland's lawyers, because often lawyers are portrayed and they get the wrong end of the stick. We should be thankful for our Scottish lawyers who have brought this juryless trials business to a crashing halt. And the first question I would ask, why do we have a social worker in charge of Scottish justice in this legislation? I mean, this is almost like interpretive dance, and getting rid of Joanna Cherry as the front bench spokesman. We've got plenty of lawyers, in the Scottish Parliament who would be more able to handle that legislation. Now, as far as I understand, it's seemingly postponed until 2018. It's not going to go ahead, largely because Scottish lawyers have refused to participate in the trials for it, which makes it unworkable. So that's why I'm praising them. The second thing I would like to say, because I'm presuming this will be my last bit of this programme, is we should not say that, we can wait and it wouldn't be that bad if there was a Labour government in 2016. We don't have as long as that. People don't understand the SNP are absolutely skint. They're hundreds of thousands of pounds in debt. They need £1.5 million to fight a normal Scottish Westminster election. They don't have it. When they don't have it, they'll lose a lot of seats. And when they lose that lot of seats, which will be sometime this year, a large amount of the money that they currently rely on through Westminster short money will disappear with these lost seats, which will make the financial crisis going into 2025, 2020 even worse than it currently is. So, this is crisis time now, not after Westminster elections. It's now. They've got to do something to recover their situation between now and when that Westminster election comes, or else they're really finished.
Yeah, it really are. This week, Neil, Keir Starmer, Sir Keir, was down. Techie, can you stick up that picture of Sir Keir Starmer telling us how Labour is now the party of English patriotism? This man has such contempt for Scotland. The Labour Party has such contempt for Scotland that they're able to turn around and say they are the party of English patriotism, and the Scots will still go and vote for them, I think, and probably a lot of them will.
Well, I don't know. It's first past the post, isn't it, in the general election? And I think a lot of Scots will vote Labour this one, because they're looking at it. They've got one vote, and they're looking, well, we're sick of the explicit Tories anyway, the blue ones that have been in for I don't know how many years now, over 10 years. And we know we don't need to say how terrible they've been. So people generally are thinking, I've got one vote, I'll vote for Labour because it'll be a bit better than what we've had. That's the rationale, and that's what a lot of people are going to do. But the thing is, they wouldn't be doing that if we had leadership up here in the SNP that were using that election to further the cause of independence. But we don't have that currently. So it is a choice on a UK level, and I wouldn't, as much as Sir Keir and the English Labour Party, which Red Rose insignia and it's vile British nationalism, as much as all of that's true, at the same time, with the current lay of the land, I wouldn't give pelters really, if you think about it, to people who maybe aren't as they're not as politically up to date or whatever, and they're looking at their one vote and they're thinking, what am I going to do with it? It's completely unsensical as we see it. But in that way, and this is the terrible situation that we've got into, really, because of the lack of leadership up here and the lack of the campaign for independence. There's been so many false summits. There's been so many lies that people are scunnered, and they're just looking for that wee bit of a better situation at a UK level. That's kind of where we've got to. But certainly, you shouldn't. You really shouldn't be voting. No one should be voting for them. But again, it's a bit like America. You've got a two-horse race. Who do you vote for, or do you not vote? And most people will vote. So that's kind of where we're at, isn't it?
Yep. as I say, the clock's beating as always, Phil. But one I'd like to go, I mean, this week, when one of the things we talk about the poverty and all the grinding poverty and the things we need, that's true. But something else that burns with me is the Rwanda bill passed this week. It got through, where we're told this is to end the people migrating in boats and arriving. It will chase it. This is just people trafficking. It's a form of slavery. And we, whether we like it or not, it's been done in our name. I'm absolutely disgusted with this. I find it quite nauseating, do you?
Yeah, this is cruel. This is cruelty. And they're almost out trying to outright wing each other, these shysters. And as I said before, what better way to impose right-wing policy on people than to get minorities to do it to the majority who are white? It's absolutely appalling. Braverman, Sunak, all of these guys, they all have capabilities. They're not stupid people, but they're tools of an establishment that is carrying out the deconstruction of the wealth that this, like it or lump it, ex-empire country used to have. And Scotland is what we're concerned about, and we are one of the wealthiest part of it. This is why they're after us and will not give up on us, and they will continue to undermine us. And it sickens you to the core to see some of the right-wing practices ongoing. And the Rwanda, it's absurd that this was allowed to happen. Another reason, it wouldn't happen in the European Union, even though we're critics of that as well, critics of that. No, we need independence, nothing less. It's the only thing that will allow us to put back into place the values and principles, the core principles that make Scotland and its people one of the greatest countries in the world.
Yeah. Eva, to tell you, as I say, the clock's beating us, but one last question I really want to get in, and I would like you to comment upon it. Techie, can you stick up that picture I just asked you to put up? Peter Morell, it turns out, was given a 2-hour warning, or a 2-day warning, was it? 2 days warning, rather, that he was going to get huckled and charged. Now, I just wanted to know, as a layman, do all people who are going to be charged with criminal proceedings or frauds, do the Police Scotland, is it a sort of part of the service? Hello, sir, we're coming to arrest you in 2 days' time if you make sure you've changed your knickers and your socks and packed a wee bag. Is this just a sort of normal thing in Scottish justice?
Oh, we could talk about this for hours. Cast your mind back a couple of weeks to the pensioner who was accused to begin with of having contravened the Hate Crime Act, which had just come into force. A woman aged 74 got a chap on the door, 2 police officers standing there, and they told her that she was being taken down to the station for questioning. She didn't get 2 minutes notice, let alone 2 days. And it kind of makes you wonder, what's the difference in these two instances? I stopped doing criminal law in the year 2000, but I had practiced criminal law for, by that stage, about 14 years. And I can guarantee you that in that whole period of time, between Alloa, Stirling and Falkirk, which are the courts that I generally appeared in, Sheriff or Justice of the Peace or District Courts as they were then, it was most rare for people to be given 2 days' notice. Sometimes you got an opportunity to appear, so that if you'd failed to attend at court and there was a warrant for your arrest, but you arrived late or you remembered about it the next day, or there was something genuine ongoing, the lawyer could arrange with the police a date and a time when you surrendered to the warrant. 2 days is unheard of from my perspective, particularly if you, again, cast your mind back to the women who were getting their doors chapped and getting huckled for being accused of hateful haberdashery or transphobic stickers or doing scary things like saying online that trans women weren't women, that sort of stuff. They didn't get 2 days advance warning that they were getting taken in to be charged or arrested or whatever. So it would tend to make you think that perhaps Scotland is not such an equal place after all, and maybe there is one law for the rich and one law for the rest of us. I say that especially so in the light of the comments I made earlier about the major difficulties with legal aid, because it looks to me very much as if the Scottish Government and very many of those around them in different institutions have forgotten that we're all supposed to be equal in the eyes of the law, and maybe it's high time some folk went back to reading the basics, such as To Kill a Mockingbird, because there's a hell of a lot of good lessons to be learned there, or in the likes of, as we've said before, 12 Angry Men.
Yeah, there's a cynic, and the cynic in me says that the law is for the rich and it's not for the poor. Well, definitely the last absolute also come out this week, Lloyd, that only 1% of all the hate crime complaints are going to be investigated. 99% are getting thrown away because the police don't think they're even worth investigating. Does that not tell us that this is bad legislation, and this is exactly with all that's happened this week, Humza should take the chance to throw it in the bin?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I look forward to the Audit Scotland report. I don't know if one's been commissioned, but one should be commissioned to look very specifically into the efficacy of the hate crime bill, and more importantly, the diversion of resources that this hate crime bill has required to happen in an already overstretched police force, an undermanned overstretched police force, with police stations with water coming up through the floor and some of them water coming in through the roof. This is nonsense. Policing should be about policing. It should not be about enforcing political dogma, particularly political dogma made up by people who have little or no real understanding of what hate crime actually is.
Right, here. We have really overshot the runway here, folks. Listen, can I thank Eva, gentlemen, for your time, your wisdom, and everything else. It's been great having you. And can I just remind everyone again, techie stick up the old all under one banner. Next Saturday is your chance. Get your flag, get your banner, and get your bahookie down to Kelvin Grove. I wish I could. I'm actually going to be in Poland. I'm on tour again. And I won't be there, unfortunately. I do apologise. I wish I was. I don't like missing the Glasgow with my home match. But it's a big, important that as many people as possible turn out. And to you, Humza, or whoever you've got watching the programme for you this week, you and all your MPs, all your MSPs, all your staffers, all your spads, get your boots on and get your airkie down to Kelvin Grove Park if you're really independentistas. And to the rest of you folks, till we see you, and I've got a special show for you midweek as well, guys. Great guest for you. I'll see you. You and yours. Take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.